everyone. Welcome to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. I'm Melissa Albers.
And I'm JJ Parker. This podcast is for seekers, seekers of happiness and joy, seekers of a centered approach to success in life, seekers of their true, authentic selves.
Get ready for some real talk on everything from anxiety, emotions, and habits to love, compassion, and forgiveness. We know you'll be challenged and enlightened by this conversation. We're so glad you're here. Let's dive in.
So, Melissa, a couple weeks ago, we talked about generations in the workforce.
Yep.
And we kind of covered all of the generations and how they sort of mix in the pot of work.
Right.
In the stew of corporate
People.
America.
Yeah, right. People stew. That sounds terrible. Anyway, continue. Press on.
But since you and I are Gen Xers, obviously we're super interested in specifically the traits of Gen Xers.
Well, actually.
And I think it has like some bigger societal impact than a lot of people appreciate.
Yes, 100%. And at the same time you were feeling that way, one of our colleagues also reached out. I don't even know if I told you this. She's like, "Oh my gosh, I listened to your pod on generations, and I was so excited for you to talk about our generation, but you didn't."
But yeah,
and I was like,
right over it.
"Oh yeah."
Well,
might be my age.
Yeah. We won't go there. So the Gen Xers, who are the Gen Xers? The Gen Xers were born mid-60s to the early 80s.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So that group in there, and then just to remind everybody, like the older generation is the baby boomers, then it goes the Gen Xers, then it goes the millennials, then it goes the Gen Z, who is the newest generation.
You know, you just do not hear people talking about our generation much at all. You don't
Right.
hear a lot of conversation about Gen X. And I would also, I don't know if I'm stealing your thunder by using the nickname already, but there's a nickname for this generation called the sandwich generation, right?
Yep. Yeah, I've heard it called the sandwich generation or the forgotten generation. I read an article that called it the middle child. Right? Everyone ignores the middle child.
Oh my gosh. And both of us are you are officially a Gen Xer too, are you not?
Right. Yeah, because I was born in 77.
Yeah. Okay.
So.
Yep. The year of the cool logos. Okay, and we're back. There's so many cool logos in the 70s.
So here's why I think from a macro level, from a real high level, this is an interesting conversation because yes, it's true that the Gen Xers kind of got lost in between the baby boomers and the millennials.
Yeah.
And there's a significant population dip. So there is about 72 million baby boomers.
Yeah.
And 72 million millennials.
Yeah.
But there's only 65 million Gen Xers, which means that there's actually a 7 million person drop in population for that span of time.
Wow. Okay, this is interesting.
Right. So to give you
somebody's been doing the Google.
Right. So to just give you perspective on this, like what is 7 million people? It's hard. It's like, I don't know, is that a lot? Is that a little? I don't know. So 7 million people would be the state of Wyoming, Vermont, North Dakota, South Dakota, Delaware, Rhode Island, Montana, and Maine combined.
Wow.
So
a couple.
Yeah. Why named all the smallest states, but that's okay.
But it really
for dramatic effect.
It added to the drama.
But it's a lot of people, and
that's a lot. Yeah.
When we think about the workforce and the roles that generally are held by more senior people, which is what the Gen Xers are becoming.
Right.
When you have that population dip, well, there's like a lot of unfilled like leadership roles, senior like like roles for more experienced people.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know, I see a lot in our industry this idea that there's kind of a lack of the there's no senior leaders. Like there's fewer CEOs available to run companies than there was in the baby boomer population.
Yeah.
Because there's just less of us.
Right. And I think there's a number of roles, like this is interesting, but there's a number of roles that being slightly older is much more beneficial, not only for the person in the role, but for those that they serve.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, consulting and coaching is another huge example of that.
Well, it's any of those roles that rely on like
experience,
long-term experience. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So that's really interesting. And so from from a work perspective, that population dips got an effect. And from a general economy perspective, it's less consumers, it's less buyers in sort of like their I don't know, prime sort of buying ability, right? When you're young, you don't have a lot of money to spend on things, but as you get older, you can maybe have more discretionary income.
Yeah.
And that discretionary income drives a lot of our economy.
That's right.
It also affects like the housing market, right? As
absolutely.
Those generations move through time, the number of houses and the kinds of housing we need changes. So it has a big effect on that too.
Size, right? Exactly.
So the thing with these Gen Xers,
us, careful now, them, don't call them them.
If I'm part of the group, can I objectify my own group?
I hear you. I hear you doing that from the moment we started hitting record.
So the way that Gen Xers grew up, I think is interesting to talk about because they grew up during kind of an interesting time, right? And we've talked about how big events are the things that shape these generations, and the generational boundaries aren't necessarily just because 30 years elapsed or something. It's because some significant thing happened in our world that has significantly shaped the way a group of people think.
Right.
And so for the Gen Xers, we went through a time in the 80s where there was a big recession. So that sort of economic instability certainly shaped us. It caused like a job security issue, right? Like the boomers before us, man, they could get their job, at whatever, at the company and just stick. But the Gen Xers had to go through this time where it's like, ooh, actually jobs aren't all that stable.
Yep, exactly.
Which I think is probably carried on to today. So I'm not saying the current generation doesn't have to deal with that, but we were like the first generation that really saw this this job insecurity stuff happen.
Yeah, and I think also you're using kind of like you're using phrases. I would say what we recognized is the way that it used to be, which was you get a job and you're in that company for 35 years. And when you leave, you get a retirement pension, a bunch of money. You get a gift, a party.
Yep.
And that's it.
You get your pension and your gold watch.
And your gold watch.
And they send you off to the pasture.
Yeah. And several people listening are going to go, what gold watch? What does that mean? It's not cryptic. It was actually a timepiece that sat on your wrist and was to remind you of all the years that you spent in that same single place of work. Yep. And I think we did recognize now that, whoa, you don't have stability and security. And I also think that there was a great amount of pressure because the generation prior was trying to prove to Gen Xers and putting a lot of pressure on them in terms of trying to go back to the way things were.
Yep.
And so when Gen Xers started leaving jobs after 2 years of experience or 3 years of experience, once they got their feet wet, that was frowned upon by the prior generation. That looked like you were job hopping and not being serious and not showing commitment.
Right.
It was more important that you be loyal to your work than you were to yourself, honestly.
Yeah, right. And that's
so
actually
a
really
shift.
Interesting call out, because it was like by one generation it was seen as like a core values, like a violation of core values.
Totally.
But for the Gen Xers, we're like, yeah, but that we're gonna do that because this whole thing's not very stable. Like,
right.
For us, it was like more like a survival thing.
Yeah. And the other thing we were pushing up against, I'm going to use the word we, and I'm still being objective about it because it is what it is. The other thing we were pushing up against is our relationship with college and having a degree, because the baby boomers were like, if you have the money and you can be in college, you have to do that.
Right.
You must show that you will be stable and do that, and then you will be marketable anywhere. That was the huge phrase that they always said, get your college degree. Now, there's a lot of carry out into that today, but it's shifted a lot. It
has. Yep.
Like you were frowned upon, and actually you did not get job interviews if you did not have a degree in almost every professional role, almost every one of them. It wasn't just the big roles today that require specialized degrees. It was almost all jobs.
Yep. For a while,
there was a
really,
lot.
really strict. And I know that through my career, I've always really pushed back on that, because it's like, I know lots of good people that college was just not for them.
Totally. I'm one of them. I'm one of them.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
The other thing that us Gen Xers went through was huge technological change. Really, technology really in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
Really came in, and we are
cable TV,
exactly,
MTV,
right? MTV. I remember where I was
MTV.
when I saw the MTV and the moon guy, and he puts the MTV flag on there.
Part cartoon, part actual photo. Hey, oh my God, I loved that so much.
I feel like for a while we might have been called the MTV generation.
Maybe.
Does that ring a bell?
No, but
okay.
it should be.
I want to be called that. That's what I want to be called.
I know. Oh my God. I know. Michael Jackson Thriller, when that came out, people waited for days and days and days around the big, huge, heavy duty sets, TV sets. Yeah.
But what we have is we get the luxury of some perspective, right?
Yeah.
Like we remember having a phone on the wall with the curly cord that was 8 feet long, and you try to like get around the corner so your parents didn't hear who you were talking to.
We remember the first video game, Pong.
Yeah, exactly. The Atari, like all this beautiful 80s 8-bit artwork.
I loved it. I loved it so much. And I know we don't have a lot of time to talk about fashion, but hello, can I just say hair? That's all.
Right, the color of hair. Neon everything.
Oh my gosh, two-tone hair, big hair. Yeah, absolutely.
So we got to see the before time.
Yes. Right. Which is how we thought of it.
Unlike, the millennials and the Gen Zers who've basically been like growing up with this stuff their entire life. They don't really know any different. So it gives us like an interesting perspective. Like I don't want to be like a crotchety old like, oh, well, back in my day, we had to go find an encyclopedia to find information.
Oh my God, we did. We had encyclopedia, full sets of Encyclopedia Britannica that on a single shelf could stretch at least 12 feet.
So we kind of went through all that, which caused us to actually have to adapt quite a bit. I mean, it was like, you remember, like early in your career, it was like everything's on paper. We're doing it this way. And then it's all of a sudden like, well, all of this is becoming computers. We got to learn these new systems, these new processes. We need to invent
word processing.
All of this new stuff, right?
Yeah. So in our day, we literally went from IBM Selectric typewriters to word processors, plug-in machines that had little 17-character LCD screens before the big computers.
So when you think
of computers, and then computers were the size of your house.
So when you think of being adaptable, this is kind of like what is shaping the Gen X generation. We think about the economic instability, the lack of job security, and the technological change that went through causes an entire generation of folks to be like pretty adaptable and resilient.
Yeah. and just put their head down and get their work done. Honestly.
Yeah. The work, that's the other thing that kind of, when I was researching this, kind of pulled up a lot, was like the work ethic of Gen Xers is a bit different. It is very strong, and it's all about what we should talk about next, which is balancing pressure from both sides, from like basically like three sides of your life, right?
Yeah.
It's high pressure at work because in general the Gen Xers, since there's that kind of that population dip, has a higher than normal or higher than historic workload and pressure.
Yep.
We've got all kids, young kids, that we're trying to raise these families. Well, for a lot of the Xers, it's like two working parents.
Totally.
Right? The generation before is much more common to have one stay-at-home parent and one working parent. But the Gen Xers really kind of had to lean into this model where you had two working parents, you're dual income family.
You had to survive. You had to survive. Yep.
And we've got kids, and we're trying to juggle work and family. Meanwhile, on the other side, we all have aging parents,
right,
who we also feel responsible to take care of.
Well, I think there's a whole lot of conversations about baby boomers. Like whenever I feel like the most common conversations, if you watch any news program whatsoever, are the boomers. You know, the aging, how they're living longer because of all of our advancements in medicine and everything else like that. They're living longer. And as they live longer, it is making them...
Sorry, as they live longer, it's putting tons of pressure on us.
Well, it kind of is. It kind of is, social and economic. And you know what? That they've earned that. It's not at all about if they're good or bad. They've earned that. And we, people on this line that are listening, that are caring for their parents, love their parents so much, which is why they feel so much responsibility. They want to do everything they can to make their parents more comfortable. But the truth is that this is a first generation that's had parents while they're this age.
Yep.
I mean, that's the truth of the matter. So it's not bad or good. It just is.
Yep. And you talked about the healthcare cost, right? We've seen unprecedented healthcare cost increase over the past, 20 years.
Yeah. And Social Security, like all of those things.
Right. And so the way the economic systems work is like you pay into Social Security through your career, but that doesn't cover the whole system. It requires current people paying into Social Security. Kind of like it's like a flywheel that's got to keep going.
Right.
And again, with the population dip from the Xers, it really puts a strain on that whole system.
Yep. Yeah.
And so we want to do the best we can, and which causes, I think, that the Gen Xers to, pay a lot more kind of out of pocket, or having to burden take some of that financial load to support their parents.
Yeah. And I, you've been talking about it from an outward in perspective, but there's just so much of the emotional part, that we haven't talked a lot about, but the emotional pressure of wanting to care for and feeling the responsibility to care for our children and give them as many opportunities as maybe we didn't have, and the emotional responsibility of and worry and concern for our parents, just that, and at the same time producing it at work consistently. And it really is. It is an interesting thing, and I find it fascinating that when we did this whole generations at work, we didn't even talk about this generation. Well, we didn't even mention it.
Yes, we did.
No, we didn't.
But that was like a whole summary episode.
Did we?
Yes, we did.
Okay. You know me, I can hide my own Easter eggs. But that being said.
Well, so I'm not quite there yet with the aging parents.
Right.
My, obviously my parents are
Parker.
young and healthy and skipping around.
So is my dad, actually. But yeah, I got you.
But I like recently watched a couple of my older cousins go through this whole process with my aunt and uncle, who are older than my parents. And, they did a fantastic job dealing with
their aging
their aging parents, and really like inspiring for me to watch, because they really handled it really, really well. But I could, you could tell it was hard. I mean, it was very hard. It's like you said, it's juggling kids, it's juggling work, and it's juggling aging mom and dad. And I don't know how they did it.
It's funny, the human spirit is so resilient. And I think that because you see this time and time again, and I've been with many friends who have lost parents now, and I'm with you. It is inspirational to watch. It's because it's something that we get afraid of and dread, I think. But when you watch the amount of connection and love and the spirit that humans have to care for other humans, it's so inspirational.
Yep.
And we don't ever talk about that. No one ever talks about that stuff. They're always talking about the bad stuff,
Yeah. Let's shift into what superpowers these Gen Xers have. Did you know you had some?
No, but I can't wait.
So
does it have anything to do with remembering every single 80s lyric that's ever been produced?
I don't know that that's a superpower.
Oh, it totally is. It totally is.
As long as you use it for good and not evil.
Okay.
So there's some traits of this generation that I think are pretty interesting. I like to lean into myself.
Ooh, let's hear them.
One of them's independence, right? So the Xers, the Xers, their parents were not the boomers, right? It's the generation before that. And the parenting style of the time was pretty hands off.
Yes.
Maybe to put it lightly.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I think unlike, we talk about like some parents that are like helicopter parents.
Yeah. Today's parents and the parents that we threaten
much
to
more
be,
engaged.
Yeah. Yes.
But the Gen Xers parents were, not that they were like absentee parents or neglectful parents, but they did not parent in the way that you see parenting happening today.
Heck no.
It was like wake up in the morning, here's some breakfast. Dinner's at 5. We'll see you then.
Oh, okay.
Right?
No, that must have been Mrs. Parker.
Okay.
That was not my mother.
Well, as we've talked about, you've got a slightly more extreme.
Yes, that's true.
Childhood.
Yes, that's true. But I think what you're getting at though is this idea that parents were not playing with their children. They were not entertaining their children. They were not giving them a constant list of things that they could do to have fun and throwing themselves on the ground to help their children do absolutely everything. Parents were very much parents. This is what you do of my child. This is your job. You will do your job because I said so. And when I come back and check in, if it's not done, you're going to be in trouble. Like more like that. Like not around to play.
And some of that caused this independence, right? Like you had to do this stuff, right? Like, you're accountable for those things on your own.
Right. Yes. Right? On your own. So, figure it out.
Autonomous, your individualism is kind of some things that describe the Gen Xers.
Huh. Interesting.
You like this next one, skepticism. You think like you're cynical or skeptical about things, Melissa?
No, I'm not.
So I think
is that a trait of the entire generation? Is that what you're reading? What? I'm going to need a little more help with that. What do you mean?
How much trust do you have in large institutions like
zero
banking
Absolutely
or government?
Zero.
Right, exactly.
Okay,
that's what I mean.
Never mind. I'm with you. Yep. Just needed an example.
like Melissa, here's a new thing that's going to solve all your problems. You should try it. What's your initial reaction?
See ya.
Yeah. Exactly. Skeptical and cynical.
Oh, I thought I was so optimistic.
You can be all those things together.
Okay, good.
But I've noticed in myself, I've noticed with peers in my generation, very skeptical of like institutions, authority, like, right?
Yes, okay, you're right.
And
yes,
kind of
yes,
coupled
yes.
with this independence thing, it's sort of like, yeah, maybe I'll just go do all that myself.
Okay, I got you.
Right?
Yeah.
Like
What I heard you say is entrepreneurs.
Well, that's the other thing is that there are a lot of entrepreneurs out of the Gen X, the X generation. It's like lots of business owners, lots of innovation, lots of creativity. And again, it's like a mix of some of these traits. We talked about it, resilience and adaptability, another superpower of the Gen Xers. Just roll with it, figure it out, get into that work ethic, just heads down. We'll just start plowing through all of this stuff.
Yeah. That's so true. That's so true. All the while holding a sandwich.
Yeah.
I can't figure out if we're called the sandwich generation because we are working so much we don't have time to make anything different, or if we're called the sandwich generation because of our
That's
kids
funny.
and our parents.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's the latter, but I really like the former.
So the other thing we got to do is from like a work perspective, a lot more collaboration, a lot more diversity. Right?
Yeah.
We're kind of like the first generation where the range of diversity in your personal work life is much greater than it was before, and partly even because of the advent of like just the communication things have been so accelerated. It's like we get to talk to for work, we get to talk to people in India all the time on a Zoom call,
right?
It's like we've
instantaneous,
like instant globalization. Like we went through globalization,
right? Yeah,
right.
That's
in
true.
the 60s, like you could get on a plane, you could maybe make a phone call, but it was really hard and expensive. Write a letter. But now we can pretty much transport ourselves physically or virtually to any part of the planet at any time.
Yeah, that's true.
So it really changes like our perspective, because we knew how it was before. And
right. Yeah, so we have appreciation for that.
Yep.
Very interesting.
So those are some things you can lean into.
Wow. I'm so glad we did this. I just honestly, when we were doing the other generational thing, you said we talked about this, but it's just funny how it's easy to focus on other things and other people outside of yourself, and you don't realize how affected you are by certain things until somebody just says something in a way that makes you go, oh, I never even thought of this. This is me. This isn't everybody else. It's me too.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
And I love this conversation because like for the purposes of like the self-awareness journey, the idea that like that we are stuck in the middle, and we have some pretty big pressure from multiple angles.
Yes, right.
And
exactly.
to just recognize that, and put some perspective around it, and then give yourself some grace when you're really feeling pressure from somewhere to say, hey, you know what, I'm feeling this pressure, but it's because like
it's a valid reason.
It's like we're in a pressure cooker, right? But
it's not me being dramatic. This is very valid. There's a lot of stuff happening here.
The pressure makes diamonds. I stole that lyric from a song.
Oh, brother. It wasn't an 80s music, though. I can tell you that right now. I'll tell you that.
But yeah, just keeping perspective and trying to do the best job we can, staying balancing all these concerns, taking on all of that responsibility. And it's okay if it gets too much. It's okay to take a break. It's okay to say, hey, I need a minute or a week to just get my head straight, because taking care of ourselves is a really important part of serving all of these other people in our lives.
Yes. And also, we are so valued. We are so valued. There's so much that we are just being who we are that adds huge value to those around us. And I don't want anyone to lose sight of that. It's so incredible how valued.
Did you enjoy this episode? Please go to your favorite podcast platform to subscribe, rate, and leave a review so others can discover it as well.
Growing self-awareness is a lifelong journey, and there's always further to go. And it's better when we're all in it together. Please think of someone you know who could benefit from hearing today's conversation and share this episode with them. We can't thank you enough for listening. Until next time, happy exploring, seekers.